Well, time for three stocks with some momentum now, and joining us to discuss what's on his radar is Jason McIntosh from Motion Trader. Jason, always great to chat with you. Just before we dive into those momentum stocks, how are you feeling about this market at the moment? We saw a pretty aggressive sell-off on Monday, but we seem to have rebounded a bit, but still down in the red today.
Yeah, look, I think there's probably a bit more to come. It's the market's had a big run over the last 15 months. I don't think we're heading towards anything dire, but look, markets need to consolidate, they need to pause. And look, we spoke in the trade a couple of weeks ago about like some divergence we're seeing in the markets. It's interesting, last night the NASDAQ hit a 52-week high, but you look at the Dow, it's well below its recent highs. So that divergence there suggests the market's not quite ready, I don't think, to really push higher now. Seasonally weaker part of the year. It's probably the next few months, maybe there's some chop and up and down and zigzag and just make it difficult for everyone.
So is it actually quite hard to pick momentum stocks then?
It depends. Some stocks will show momentum even when the market's going sideways to lower. So it's pick and choose, and it's a great thing about momentum. It's not just like, it's just momentum makes the stocks which are doing something interesting stand out, and then you have a look at what's driving it and come up with some interesting ideas, like we have today.
Yeah. So what's on the top of your list then?
Yeah, well, first up is a stock called SomnoMed. Its ticker code is SOM, and like this is a really interesting company. It's got a market cap of about $190 million, not in the All Ordinaries. So for most people, it's probably it's just not going to be on the radar whatsoever. And so it came to my attention through the momentum. And it's interesting when you look behind what drives the momentum. Sometimes you find some fascinating ideas. This being one of them. So what they do is they develop treatments for sleep-related disorders, and the key focus is on something called obstructive sleep apnea. Now, this affects about 9% of women, 25% of men, so it's a pretty big deal. And the traditional therapy has been to wear a pressurised mask at night when you sleep. It goes over your nose and mouth, and it's all a bit of it's a bit cumbersome. And the studies show that after a few months, a lot of people drop off using it. So what SomnoMed have, they've got something they call continuous open airways therapy. So this is a clinically proven oral device. Goes in your mouth, opens the airways, makes breathing easier, and it's a lot less obtrusive than the traditional ways. So what the company's been doing is they've got a really big potential market for this product. It's management say it's something like a $9 billion global market, 6 to 8% growth per year. And you look at the company's financials, they're doing quite well. Revenue in the last half, it was down 7%, but that was all in the North American market. Asia Pacific and Europe, they're actually up slightly. Much of the downturns due to COVID. You got to go and see the dentist to sort of like get these the oral thing working. And so as things reopen and get back to normal, the company's expecting things to pick up again. Encouragingly, their margins stayed strong during this period, and EBITDA was up 7% to $3 million. So I think there's a lot of upside potential in this. They've treated 615,000 people over 28 countries and since they've been around. So it's not a new company, but it's a company which is with a new product which has really got that growth potential. And I think, look, over the next couple of years, we could see some really good movement there.
Let's move along. Let's get to the next name, Kleos Space. Satellites geolocation services. Knowing where you are on this world is going to be very important for so many different things. As automation creeps in. What do you like about that one?
Yeah, I always love a good space story.
Yeah.
And look, this is another one of those momentum stocks, which it's a $150 million company, not in the All Ordinaries. The only way you find these things often is because they jump out because of their share price is doing something. Interesting story. What they do is they use clusters of satellites to look at radio frequency transmissions across maritime areas, and then they do the analysis on that data to identify hidden and illegal activities through geolocation. So it's things like drug smuggling, people smuggling, illegal fishing, crossing borders, that sort of stuff. So they're saying that it's going to have a big market around in the defence, security, maritime intelligence sort of fields. And so what they've done, they launched their first cluster of 4 satellites in November. They've got another cluster of 4 due to go up in the next couple of months, and then they've got another cluster after that, their third cluster, towards the end of the year. In total, they're looking at a constellation of 20 clusters, and they say that every cluster of 4 satellites they send up, they increase the depth of information they get and the value of that information. They then sell on to government agencies and commercial parties that are interested in that sort of information. They say that navies, coast guards, defence, these are border patrol agencies are all key customers. They're targeting 50 subscribers by the end of this year. They've got a pipeline of over 160. And by the end of this year, they're targeting revenues of $7 million. So if they can do that, they've got a good springboard into next year. Like this whole geospatial technology field is huge. It's like $550 billion, they're saying, by 2025. This is a $150 million company. So if they can get a foothold, looks like they've got some really interesting technology. It's a company which could really be some significant upside. Interestingly, the co-founders still have a substantial stake in the company. And look, you always want to see the people behind the company with a lot of skin in the game. Gives your company confidence to go with your own money.
Yeah, it's always one that analysts look for, isn't it? And GARDA is another one on your list. GARDA Diversified Property Fund. Tell us a bit more about why you like it.
Yeah, not quite as exotic as the other two. They're not coming up with new technology or putting satellites into orbit. It's more of a traditional. It's a small to mid-tier property fund. $280 million market cap, not in the All Ords, so it's not on the not at the top of the top tier of the property trust. But it's interesting what they do. They've got 14 properties across Queensland and Victoria, mostly in Brisbane and Melbourne. A few properties in Gold Coast, Mackay and Cairns. And an interesting aspect of this company is they've got this strategy to develop and then own. So they'll buy the industrial site, they'll develop it, they'll build something, then they'll lease it out. So they'll get the income as well as the upside from the development. Strategy's been working well for them. They've got 3 properties under development at the moment. They've recently acquired 3 new industrial sites which they'll develop. And the split at the moment, it's 49% industrial, 51 office. So I guess the big question mark is what happens with office. And like I come into the city and I look around the buildings, just look out the office windows here and you see all the vacant desks. So that's the question mark. But I think a lot of that has probably already been priced in. So you look at the dividend yield, it's 5.7%. They're trading at a almost 14% discount to NTA. So that's where I say I think it's been priced in. So if we see some unwinding of that discount, maybe the office space comes back better than some people are expecting. There's upside in the capital growth there. There's a good income story. Look, RBA is saying no rate hikes for a couple of years still. Even if that changes, any potential rises, I think would be quite small. I'm not expecting anything great to happen in the interest rate space for some time. So I think it's hard to walk past a 5.7% yield when the asset's trading at a discount to its NTA. So I think a steady, stable performer, good growth and income story. Nothing exciting, but you don't need excitement to make money sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you don't need excitement. There was a good list there. SomnoMed, Kleos Space, which was the exciting one, and GARDA Diversified Property Fund as momentum stocks. Jason, always great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us.
A lot of fun being here as always. Thank you.